This is titled Warm Embrace and is a silhouette design. I usually begin with a chalk drawing that is placed on top of a colored surface like this one. This I found in my studio archives and decided to paint over it. I started this with a goopy mixture of chromium oxide green. To make it soupy, I added some GAC 500, which is a medium made by Golden. This creamy mixture gives me time to push the paint around with my palette knife and also to scratch into the paint using the color shapers. When painting this way, hold your palette knife in the middle or near the end of the handle. There's a few things to consider when you're thinking about how to paint your trees. Consider how it looks around the negative space around the trees, especially when you're doing a silhouette like this one. When you look at the negative space of how trees are shaped, they're more likely to look more natural and less symbolized. Consider too how trees actually grow and how the branches might be narrower near the top and get thicker and heavier near the bottom. Also, when you're painting, look at the little light holes in between the branches. If you leave a few of these naturally as you do this type of painting, it'll be easier for you to do the painting behind the trees later on. For the foreground foliage, this is chromium oxide green plus white plus the GAC 500 to make it goopy. To make the tree trunks a nice dark color, I took the cadmium red medium plus the ultramarine blue to make that color. You can also add a tiny bit of chromium oxide green in there too. At the start of the painting, I added the circle for the sun. This is a nice light dot for me to compare my mid values and my darker values as I go along. When I'm checking for my values, or otherwise called shades, I look at a black and white photo as well as the color to compare how I'm doing. One of the things that I try not to do is to be a slave to the photograph, so you can see the painting looks quite different than the actual photo. It's actually fun to take video or photos of your paintings as you go along. One of the things that I really like about the painting at this stage is the looseness of the marks. And even though I like the painting at the end, I think if I was going to do this again, I would try to maintain a little more of this kind of loose thing that's going on here. I think a good way for any of us to do this is perhaps put a painting aside and just let it breathe for a little while, maybe work on something else, and then revisit your painting and take a look at it, decide where to go. Here comes a really fun part, and that is putting light holes behind the trees. This is a little bit of Indian yellow plus white, and I'm putting it on fairly thick. And one of my goals is try to put these light holes in a way that looks natural. To make these tree trunks look more burned out by the sun, I added a little bit of white to ultramarine blue and lightened out the trees where they're near to the sun. I add more white paint to that ultramarine blue as I get closer to the sun, and once I place some of these marks, I've switched over to white with a little bit of Indian yellow. And while this paint is wet, I'm taking my color shaper, and that's that silicone tip tool, to make scratches into the paint, just to play around with letting a little bit of that background show through. And then I continue across and make more negative space holes in different places. As I look at the painting at this stage, I'm a little heartbroken that I didn't leave more of those loose marks. However, on we go. So here I'm taking straight cadmium yellow light and adding it into the spaces between and under the trees. I'm wanting to lighten up around the sun, which I'll continue to do more and more. So when you're painting sun shining through trees, this is something that you want to consider. At this stage of painting one of my acrylic landscape paintings, I'm doing what I call the color dance. This just means that I'm taking the paints that I have set up on my palette for this painting and creating a color balance. Here I'm adding a hint of the river in the distance. And dance, 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 I'm going over to the left side in the front foliage and adding some more opaque passages of that chromium oxide green. To really get a sense of the sun shining through the trees, I'm taking zinc white and a little bit of Indian yellow and creating a circular semi-opaque blend around the sun. To create another color layer and a complement to the orange, I've taken ultramarine blue plus some white to add another color to the tree branches. As I add that color, I'm also scratching out to let some of that green show through. This color contrast is adding some brightness to the painting. Another thing to notice is where I put the glint of the river water, I painted it with white and then I glazed over with Indian yellow to give it that brightness. To further make it look like the sun is shining through the trees, paint the tips of the branches closest to the sun lighter than the rest of the branches. This helps to add to the glow. To simplify the design and to create a feeling of hands holding the sun, I removed the top left trees. As promised, here's your tiny tip for big impact. A fairly easy way to help create a glow around the sun is to take zinc white plus a color and mix them together along with an acrylic medium such as GAC 500. Zinc white is a semi-transparent paint, and into it I mixed Indian yellow, which is a transparent paint. So this is going to create kind of a haze over my painting as it dries. You'll have to play around a little bit with how much acrylic medium that you're going to add to your zinc white paint. Here I'm adding equal amounts to see what will happen. Once those two are mixed together, I'll take a little bit of that transparent Indian yellow color and mix it into that. If you prefer, you can test your glaze over top of something that's not your painting first. Let this test glaze dry completely to see what the effect is. To apply the paint, I use an inexpensive soft synthetic brush. Sometimes I'll tap my brush on an old towel just to control how much paint is on it. And there's your tiny tip for big impact. Lastly, I check my painting in black and white to make sure the tonal values work, and I think they do, and here's the final painting. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, your art enriches life. Take care. Bye-bye.